Hello, everyone. Well, thank you so much for joining us and for watching In the Shadow of Beirut. What an incredible film. And now we're in for such a treat. Myriam, she's joining us from Beirut, and Stephen, who's joining us from Santo Domingo, and Pamela Yates, who's joining us from somewhere in New York State. She's a filmmaker and she's the host of this Q&A. And so I'd like to leave you now,
Hello,
Stephen and
everyone. Well, thank you so
Marianne.
much for
With Pamela,
joining
thank you so
us
much.
and for watching.
Thank you so much, Meira, and welcome, Stephen and Myriam. Myriam is in Beirut, where the electricity has been cut, very much in keeping with the tone of the film. So I'm so glad that you could join us. And Stephen, and to both of you, really, congratulations on the awards that the film has won and being Ireland's official selection to represent the country as the best international feature at the Oscars. But I wanted to stay in the emotion of the film for a minute. Stephen, you created an unusually intimate way into the story of families in the shadow of Beirut. You relied on emotion rather than facts. How did your approach come about?
Sure. Firstly, just hi to everybody who's watching, and immense gratitude for watching the film. I was given an ultimatum in 2015 by my partner to move, who got work in Beirut, and who basically said to me, I'm done doing the distance thing and I'm moving to Beirut. If you want to continue this, you have to move with me. So I decided that my life was better with her in it than it was without. So I moved to Beirut and I bought a bicycle and I set about exploring the city. And the day that I rode my bicycle into the vegetable market part of Sabra, immediately I was struck by the difference with the rest of the city, and that I was in a very different socioeconomic place. And I connected with one particular person who became a good friend, and through him he brought me into his family in Shatila, and which was headed by a matriarch in her 70s. She's no longer with us, and through that, like through the matriarch nearly adopting me like an additional son, and nearly feeling sorry for me, probably not being able to speak the language. I spent about 3 years just in the communities of Shatila and Sabra, learning Arabic, listening to people, and being educated by the communities on how they live and the challenges that they face, and also the reasons for those conditions. And after about the 3-year mark, at times of celebration, be it a new child born, be it a wedding, or times of struggle, be it something that, rightfully so, somebody was angry about, people from the community started to ask me to film. Steve, film this. Everybody knew that I was a camera guy and a cinematographer, and people would say to me, bring your camera here, film the celebration. But also when I was there, maybe it was somebody from the government coming to extract a bribe unfairly from somebody. And then it just sort of began to grow at that 3-year mark. And then I filmed for the next 4 years with people's trust, and with an immense responsibility to friends and collaborators in front of the camera, that, I was in their most intimate spaces, and people would always say to me, Steve, you know more about our own family than we do. And I never set out to make a film, so leaving Beirut at the 5-year mark, then it was like I had accumulated hundreds of hours of footage, and that's when I reached out to Myriam and Aboot Productions, and I reached out to the team behind GAZA, the 2019 film at Sundance, and it was Ireland's selection nomination for the Oscars in 2020. So I reached out to Gary and Brendan, I reached out to Myriam, Zaina, and like formed this sort of Lebanese-Irish production team to make the film a reality.
You had a very gentle approach, though. And that's really clear in the storytelling itself. You were an outsider. What strengths do you think you brought to your vision for bringing out the emotions as an outsider? And then I want to bring Myriam in too.
Sure.
You had a big role.
I'd love to hear Myriam's view on that being Lebanese.
I will ask her, don't worry.
Sure. As an outsider, Beirut and Lebanon is a heavily sectarian society, meaning that different religious groups sort of, religion is connected to politics, and then people in power know that people are weaker separated than they are together. So people are purposely kept separately, and the narrative and the dialogue there means that people themselves don't feel comfortable going into other areas or going, if you identify as one sect, maybe you move in particular neighborhoods, but you don't go into others because of a perceived risk or an unknown. And there's an unknown there in that decision. I didn't have any of those labels put on me. It was Steve, the Irish camera guy, on his bicycle, and people would say to me in Shatila, Steve, don't go into that part of Sabra there. They're going to hurt you. They're going to kneecap you. They're going to rob your camera. And I would thank the people that were warning me, like, okay, sure. And then I would walk for 5 minutes and enter into the area. And the people who would receive me would say to me, Steve, I can't believe that you came from those people over there. So there was a separation thing within the community that, as an outsider, I was lucky that I was very aware of it, but it didn't act as an obstacle to me and my friends and how I moved. And also, as an outsider, I'm bringing in a different perspective on what I was seeing, and working closely with Myriam and with the people in the film, really was educated by them and learned so much about what I was seeing and what my friends were experiencing and why.
Yeah, it always struck me that your intimacy had a lot to do with how closely and how well you listened. And sometimes being an outsider is part of that. But you also had an insider, which was you, Myriam. And I wanted to ask you, why did you want to get involved in this particular film? And what did you bring to it as a citizen of Lebanon and as a resident of Beirut?
Stephen got in touch with me in 2020. So it was already like a hard moment for Lebanon. We had a complete Lebanese financial collapse. Like the banks had collapsed, and with them all the savings of people, and it was COVID times, and like there was like a whole confusion, and I was producing 2 documentaries telling the crisis, but like via different angles, directed by Lebanese filmmakers, and most of the films I produced were made by Lebanese or Arab filmmakers. So Stephen was recommended to me by a friend, and I of course met with him, etc. And at first I was skeptical, because it was like an Irish filmmaker doing a film about Sabra and Shatila camps, which I know like are places where there's a lot of poverty. And I was like, okay, I'm so not interested in in showing that aspect from my country, like the fact, to show that, oh, we have a poor people here, and and we're looking for empathy, etc. So this is completely not the kind of films I like to be part of. And then Stephen showed me some of his footage, and we engaged in conversation. So first, I was extremely impressed with his Arabic, because it's a very hard language to learn. And then his immersion in the camps, and to be honest, like, these are places where I have never been, because there's this stigma on these places. I've known about them, like, because of their history. I passed next to them, and I've known them from other documentaries, but actually I've never been inside. and
Interesting.
and I've always been afraid to go inside,
Of
because
course.
there is like the stigma of these places being very violent, very aggressive, and also like not welcoming places. And then I discover Stephen's footage, and it's like they irradiate of humanity, and you see people, like, I saw people like me, and sometimes we tend to forget that we are all equal in our humanity. So when I saw this, it really spoke to me, and I was struck by their struggles, but also their humanity, the hopes, the love they had for each other, their union as families, and I thought, wow, like, this is something really that we should show of these places. To, like Stephen said, my country is very, very divided. It's very, like, people are always feeling the other is a stranger. So I thought this is a film that can bring us together. And I thought, if it had that impact on me as one individual, then it should have the same impact on the rest of my compatriots, but also show a different image than the one we think of when we think about the camps of Sabra and Shatila.
Right.
So I got on board, and then we started working. And regarding like my input, like, of course, I worked on some logistics parts, like getting permits and making sure to find the right crew for Stephen to be welcome, like, to be comfortable and all of that. But also mainly we I was involved. I feel I was like kind of the cultural translator, in some aspects, like saying, like, okay, this is how we perceive things. So maybe it's better that you do not put things this way, or you do not, like, this is a very sensitive topic, so you should mention it a bit differently, etc. So, for example, the explosion in the film is something that we went through a lot in the editing, because it was like a really big, huge explosion that destroyed half the city, but these camps were not affected. So the whole debate was like, how much do we put it in the film, and how much don't, like, what's the right balance, so we are not disrespectful to the event, but at the same time not, use it just for sensationalism, and this type of things. So I remained quite involved during the editing process.
Stephen calls you a warrior, and he really commends he commends your production company too. How did you two complement each other? Why does he call you a warrior?
This is a hard question. I honestly don't feel like a warrior. I feel like I'm just working in a tough place, and the mere fact of producing films in Lebanon feels like a combat, because like, nothing is set to go for you. Everything is hard to make, and since I'm working, like, it keeps getting harder because the conditions worsen. So I feel it comes from that. But it's just like about, I feel I have no choice, because for me, cinema was like, I come from a small village, and my father was a big cinephile, and cinema really changed my life, and like, I feel it opened up my horizons, and it really made me a more open-minded person, and in a place that was very conservative, very close-minded, and I feel I had this openness to the world because of that. And so I truly feel it there's like a kind of mission in making films and telling stories from a country that is super small, but there's so many prejudice on it, and so many stories related by media that are either black or white. And I feel my role as a filmmaker, and of course, like every filmmaker, is to tell stories that are more nuanced, and that tell the gray, the shades of gray that you don't see in media, and tell authentic stories. So I think just the tenacity to keep doing this job feels maybe uh, like a combat. But I feel we complemented. Like, it was really, I think it was one of the smoothest projects I worked on, because
Really?
Stephen and Gary like are very professional. They know what they wanted. They were always very precise. And when like me or my team explained like the constraints or the restrictions, they would always be very understanding of them, and then we would find ways to go around them, or like to collaborate. So I don't think we had any like big issues um, related to that. On the contrary, it was like really smooth along the way.
Okay, thank you. Stephen, I wanted to ask you, what about, how did you conceive of the look of the film? Because I know you're very focused on using the power of cinema to underline and highlight the humanity of people. But what's your concept when you went into documenting, beauty in the midst of poverty and suffering?
Sure. It's I didn't use one additional light for any scene. Anything that's there is all natural light. So often, in documentary filmmaking, if you include a light, and sometimes you have to, but you're changing the textures, the emotion, the mood, like the message that, what's happening in front of the camera. So I very much the camera was only rolling for like a small like less than 5% of the time that I was in Sabra and Shatila, because it was all about people and community and compassion and solidarity with people. So the camera was on 5% of the time. The hundreds of hours of footage that we captured were just what I saw. It could have been an interaction with people. It could have been nice light. Maybe it wasn't nice light, but just I would try, and I worked solo for those 5 years that I lived in Beirut until I brought in Myriam and the Lebanese team and the Irish team. But it was just trying to frame things like that it accurately captured, because I'm looking at things from my own perspective, and people are going through different emotions within this small space in people's homes, and just to try and be truthful to the story, to what was happening, and not to, if there's a tense mood, film it that way. If it was a happy mood, film it that way. If it was sad, if it was a struggle, if it was anger, whatever it was, to try and capture it that way. And then, of course, the areas that themselves are their own characters with such a history. I'm sure a lot of our viewers, our audiences, have heard of or know of the Sabra and Shatila massacre. So to have that history, and Shatila being born out of the 1948 Nakba, Sabra then being itself born from the Shiite community's forced displacement from violence and occupation in the south of the country, settling next to Shatila because nobody wanted to live next to Shatila. And then these two areas just growing with very resonant and connected reasons to geopolitics globally. And we're not going to get into the politics here, but I purposely stayed away from that in the film to keep it as human and as compassionate as possible. But the areas were distinctive characters in themselves that offered so much history of the side of the oppressed and the losing side.
But you could have filmed it in a very like rough way, but
Yeah.
you chose to film it in a very beautiful and polished way. So I'm wondering
Sure.
where that decision, that choice came from in terms of
Sure.
cinema, the power of cinema.
Sure. No, I probably filmed it the way that I filmed it because I've seen so many documentaries like that have shaky camera work and didn't stitch together in a visual way. You know, for me, a documentary film needs to be intellectually, it needs to hold water intellectually, it needs to connect with audiences compassionately, and then visually it needs to be of a high enough quality that people are going to sit there and look at it, and it's not shaky, grainy camera footage. It's like I want to bring people into the areas, into people's homes, and to connect and to feel with people, so that, and if there's camera movement, it reminds people, oh, there's a camera here, you know, there's somebody in the room. But I was trying to go as immersive as possible in these small spaces with people who trusted me.
Great, thank you. You know, the film generates a lot of emotion. And when people see the film, they have this emotion. This is a question for both of you. What would you like the film to do? What effect do you want the film to have on people? Or what would you like people to do after they've seen the film?
Myriam or me?
I could start. Like, I feel like I feel a film can operate on many layers. I think the first one is like really to raise awareness about this area and about these people, and like discover them in their humanity. Like I said, also away from the prejudice and the stigma we have on them. I also feel like it's a film that we would like to allow people to understand like the different, because for example, when I watched the film and I started working on it, like I really thought Sabra and Shatila were primarily like Palestinian refugees, and I was surprised to discover there were like so many different communities living there. So I think it also sheds a light on the diversity of the country and the geopolitical situation. And I think it would be great if it leads people, you know, to want to learn more about the country and the different people coming from different struggles, etc. And lastly, like what we are trying to do also is to shed light on these particular families and this particular neighborhood, and try to like raise money in some capacity to be able to help them in
To
their
raise
different
money.
struggles.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, and because also like the children, you see the character of Abu Ahmad, you see the kids, like they all, you know, really they yearn for education, they want to go to school, they want to learn. And so I feel if we manage to put some of them through schools, or like help them get tutors to teach them how to read and write, like try to make their life, you know, better in any way possible, not just like by feeding them and like you know, providing money that would allow them to eat for a week or two, but like really make a long-term impact. I think for me that would be the ideal outcome also
Very
from
good.
the film.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And from my side, three things. Imagine if there was a fund called the Saria Fund after the girl who passed away in the film. You know, that was for emergency health interventions, life-saving health interventions in the communities, or in Beirut in Lebanon. Imagine what a legacy that would be for the film in Saria's name. You know, social impact. We have a social impact share doc to our viewers. Google share doc in the shadow of Beirut, and there's a place there where people can contribute if they feel compelled to. The two other things that I want to emphasize that the first one is just for people to be more compassionate, as Myriam said, you know, in her own country, there's this separation, but then imagine when you put national borders and boundaries and seas and mountain ranges in between the people who live there and other people in the world. So I've had the immense privilege to get to know so many people in Beirut and in Sabra and Shatila and the country at large. But my mother hasn't, my friends haven't, most Irish people haven't, most people in the US haven't. So it's just to bridge those gaps and make us all care a bit more and not be as quick to judge. And don't, like, please just, I mean, we all judge, we all have our prejudices, but just slow down that judgment a little bit until you know more, you know. Yeah. And then thirdly, Oscars. The film is in 2 Oscar categories. We're a complete underdog. We don't have the big budgets, hundreds of thousands of dollars, I'm told, and then I'm told bigger millions of dollars for the streamers who are backing documentary films. The film is in the Best International Feature category, being Ireland's nomination. It's in the documentary feature category as well, after its award at Doc Edge Festival. And I just want people here who've seen it and who care and who connected with it to tell other people about the film and try and super grassroots, just try and get the name of the film out there. And if there are any people who can push it and influence it, and by any help is great, least of all for a golden statue, but more just to get the film in front of people and for people to care, because none of us made the film for any awards, and even being in the 2 Oscar categories is an immense honor. So thank you.
Right, and so while you know, more than almost 200 people signed on to see the film tonight. So to my fellow Academy members, please go out and tell other people to see the film. That's all we can do, to see the film, but that's a lot that we can do, because like all filmmakers, we really just want the films to be out there. I want to open this up to the audience questions, because we still have about 10 minutes left. And I'm going to amalgamate the questions, okay? But a lot of the questions have to do with spending the amount of time that you spent with the families. How much time did you spend with the families? How many hours of film did you shoot? And you seem to have a particular connection to the children. The children who are the protagonists in the film are very, very strong. And in many ways, according to this question, they're the soul of the film. How did you do that? These are filmmakers that would really like to get inside this process, and you're thinking about that.
Sure. To put it out there, and I never set out to make a film when I moved to Beirut in 2015, so my approach is probably extremely inefficient, and but I approached it as a human first, and I was drawn towards the children. I became a father myself to my son, who was born in Beirut in 2018, and that then immediately changed how I viewed things. My lens changed. I focused on the children because even the parents themselves, there was a certain level of, you know, our lives are sort of gone with, you know, this is the the deck of cards that we've been dealt, but we still hope for our children, like that their lives might be different than ours are. And it was that dynamic and love between parents and their children was just so overarching and concrete. And I didn't want it to be a film about hopelessness and despair, like, because that's not what is the main emotions there are love and family and just be patient and despite all the odds just stacked against you, just and at times, of course, you know, people are human. Like people make mistakes. People break down. People should be allowed to do that. But my approach was very much just human first and filmmaker second, and that nearly still is the case now. You know, but my 5 years living in Beirut full time felt like 20 years of a life lived, and the film is nearly a byproduct of that. You know, it's a bonus. It's a huge bonus because then I can share it with the world. You know, like that these are brave, heroic, human people, humane and compassionate people living in incredibly tough situations that nobody should live through.
Yes,
yeah,
thank you.
I hope that answered it a little bit.
It did very well, and
Yeah.
I'm getting the sign from Myriam that we need to close. But I wanted to. There are many questions, and we'll save the chat for you. People want to know, how can we see it again, and how can other people see it again? So for everyone who's in the Academy, it's on the Academy platform. You can see it there. But how will people, where are you going to roll it out? How can people see it again or recommend it?
Great question. We don't have a distributor. We're looking for a distributor. And with the distributor on board, it would become a lot easier to roll it out, to get it in front of audiences more easily. It's screening at festivals all around the world. It's going to the Red Sea Film Festival in Saudi Arabia as its Middle Eastern premiere in a few weeks' time. It's screening in Ireland at the Irish Film Institute for a week in December. It's in DC at the American Film Institute. Some screen there so it's coming out slowly. But the more people that talk about it, and the more people that sort of shake the cages and let people know, like that this is a film that needs to get out into the world like a pigeon in the film, you know, like set it free, get it out, and that comes with audiences connecting with it and spreading the word.
Right, and they can go to your website, maybe sign up for your mailing list so that they can find out when the film goes into general distribution.
Absolutely.
And your film website is?
StephenGerardKelly.com.
Okay, StephenGerardKelly.com. Yeah. Maybe Trevor or Myriam, you can put that in the chat. Okay, well, thank you so much, Myriam. Thank you so much for joining us from Beirut in the middle of the night.
Thank you. It was a real pleasure.
Right.
And thank you all for staying, and thank you for moderating this conversation.
Welcome. You're so welcome. It's really great to meet you. Stephen, thank you so much. And thank you both for the film. Congratulations.
Thank you, Pamela. Thanks so much. Thanks to everybody for watching. Talk to you. Take care.
Talk to you. Bye.